Ladies and gentlemen, President Trump's acquittal is a certainty. They will not get 17 senators to side with Democrats. Democrats will not get 17 Republican senators to side with them. That's what you would need for two-thirds of the House, two-thirds of the Senate to convict. The Attorney General of D.C., the Mayor of D.C., they're not leveling charges in a court of law against President Trump. There are no federal charges. There's no court of law that's looking at this. This is a purely political endeavor. Democrats think that if Trump is impeached twice, somehow he's not going to run in 2024, or that hurts the movement he's created within the Republican Party. Trump controls the Republican Party. That was an NBC News article, a political article that I cited yesterday on the amount of control he already exerts within the Republican Party, which is a very good thing. You want a populist political party. You want one party to be a more populist political party that goes against never-ending counterinsurgency conflicts. When people say, well, how could you have voted for Trump? He was a great president. In terms of achievements, which is what a president should be judged by, maybe he wasn't a diplomatic individual. That's true. His rhetoric, or the manner in which he utilized social media, should have been tempered. But in terms of achievements, Abraham Accords, peace between North and South Korea, the beginning of détente, reversing U.S. foreign policy, ending our longest-running military conflict, not starting a new theater of conflict. These are all things that presidents should be judged by, their accomplishments. Renegotiating NAFTA into the USMCA, signing the First Step Act, prison reform legislation, allocating more funding to historically black colleges and universities than any president ever, signing an executive order combating anti-Semitism on college campuses, using the definition from the IHRA. So if you don't think that's a big deal, or you don't think that you think that's not important, look up the organization whose definition President Trump used to combat what's going on college campuses. So, hit subscribe to this channel right now. Not many people are, hit subscribe to this channel. We're on our way to 200,000 subscribers. I'm going to give you a vantage point that a lot of people are missing. You can see my debates on Goodman.com. You can read my writing in The Hill, The Huffington Post Salon, The Jerusalem Post, The Times of Israel, other publications, The Roanoke Times. This is interesting, and it's kind of hilarious. Washington Post. House managers argue that attack on Capitol was predictable because of Trump's provocations. Well, if it was predictable, why didn't they state that he's leading to something like this is going to happen? Now, the protests shouldn't have taken place. That's true. There should have been a national dialogue, discourse, discussion, debate. He should have taken it to them. MSNBC, CNN didn't want to hear an opposing vantage point pertaining to the past, to what his claims were. Now, President Trump should have fostered a national dialogue. There were numerous ways to do so. I talked about that the past couple of months. I said, look, go on, speak to everybody from Maddow to Joe Rogan to just get your vantage point out there. His legal team dropped the ball. Not so much in terms of his legal team dropped the ball in many ways, primarily in communicating. Part of what Democrats do is they have a monopoly on political thought. They have a virtual monopoly on political thought, and what doesn't make sense, and the irrational claims like Trump worked with Russia, or that he was in a Moscow hotel room, or that that Biden is pure as the driven snow, and he shouldn't have been investigated, and Trump strong-armed Zelensky, and the pandemic was all Trump's fault. It certainly wasn't Cuomo or Phil Murphy or Whitmer's fault. All of these accusations are not rational. It is not rational or logical or reasonable to call President Trump a reincarnation of the 1930s and 1940s Germans. It is not normal. What they have done is utilize social media, especially Twitter, which, by the way, it being up today is completely, they beat estimates, but so what? they actually admitted that their user growth is slowing and they have to go to subscriptions. They've been talking about subscriptions because their user base is just not growing enough to build the company to where it wants to be, which means their debt is increasing as well. So you're looking at a platform that's on life support essentially. It's not technically on life support yet, but it will not be as influential. It will not be around about 5 or 6 years from now. You're looking at a company that if it's not bankrupt 5 or 6 years from now, it'll be a fraction of what it was in terms of influence in this country. Thank God. Then I was reading also like what's his name said, Dorsey said, oh yeah, 80% of our users are in other countries. Other countries are smart enough not to focus and base their political discourse in a cyber reality that's a cauldron of discontent and unhappiness and angst. Ideas that would never resonate in any other venue or in reality have a home in this dystopian cyberspace called Twitter. This is why AOC is so popular on Twitter. And President Trump shouldn't have utilized Twitter in the manner that he did. I know that people say, I don't want to hear that again. He should not have insulted LeBron James. He should not have insulted NFL athletes. He took away from, first of all, it wasn't good in creating, if he wanted to present an opposing vantage point to the anthem protest, for example, he could have simply said, why don't Democrats kneel? Why doesn't Schumer kneel? He could have stated those things. He didn't have to. The insults, what happened was, ladies and gentlemen, really quickly, we're in this situation because Democrats do not have, like, for example, the stimulus checks. It's gone from $2,000 to $1,400. They're not going to implement Medicare for all. That's never going to happen. They're not going to implement that. For Democrats will never implement. I'm open to it if it's feasible. Obviously, I used to want it. It's not feasible, but I could be wrong. But Democrats will never, ever pass that. Look at what Jimmy Dore is doing, which is fantastic. He is forcing the Democratic Party to abide, to fulfill their promises. Democrats lie about policies that are important to left-leaning voters, and they funnel the votes back into the Democratic Party. That they do this. They use AOC and Bernie Sanders and other politicians to funnel votes back into the Democratic Party. They use the $20 million venture capital people and all the people who yell the loudest about, morality and condemnation of Trump. And when it comes to it, these people say, oh yeah, we can't implement Medicare for all now. And Jimmy Dore says, well, why not? You have the House. We have in their vantage point, the Democrats. So they say we have the House, the Senate, the presidency. So why not? But they don't have any. They're not very good at governing. That's why Clinton wasn't President Obama's third term. They have every single possible conceivable advantage. New York Times, Washington Post, MSNBC, CNN, The Atlantic, Esquire, Vanity Fair. I mean, every publication out there. Los Angeles Times. Every major news publication in every major city, a newspaper. All of Hollywood. You will not work in Hollywood. All of late night. You can't even enjoy yourself. If you're one of the 74 million supporters of President Trump, you're basically don't exist in the eyes of Jimmy Kimmel. You have been erased from history in the eyes of late night in Hollywood and even sports. You can't even talk. Now, articles written about sports are more about society and politics than they are about sports. There's one, the USA Today article was like, what? What did you want Brady to do? He's supposed to talk about the tragedy that took place. He had nothing to do with that. Trump had nothing to do with that. He didn't tell people to do anything. This is not an issue that is a Republican issue or an issue of somebody like Brady, or it's not like that has nothing to do with even Trump. That's why they're not even leveling charges at Trump in a court of law. He should have created a discourse. I'll leave it at that, and a discussion And if you say, well, he couldn't have because they wouldn't want it. No. He had the platform. He was president of the United States of America. Well, I mean, it did no good. Even me, I was looking at the tweets. You know what? And I was like, oh my God, then there's other ways to do this. Because you could see, like, you know, they were winning the media battle the past year. You could see the beginning of the pandemic, polls showed that that the public was supporting President Trump. And then the media kept going and going. It's Trump's fault. Every life lost is Trump's fault. But with Cuomo and Phil Murphy, for some reason, their destructive decision making, and we can go into it, especially with Cuomo and other Democratic governors, they skirted responsibility, circumvented responsibility. How do you blame Trump, one person, when you have a governor, mayor, senators, city council people? You're governed as a citizen of this country by a whole lot of people before it gets to the president. But see, again, the insults, it warped people's minds. They didn't care. There was no reason or logic because Twitter is a place where reason and logic are buried in a grave called, social media. It's all emotion and groupthink and bullying, either overtly or in this peer pressure. You cannot think differently on Twitter. I don't have Twitter for 2 years. I deleted my Twitter account 2 years ago. So I'm not right about everything, but like a lot of the analysis I give is spot on, 100% accurate. I told you, do not delete your Twitter account. If you're on Twitter right now and you support President Trump, delete the account. There's no reason to be there. And if I was the Republican Party too, every Republican, every conservative publication, I would delete the Twitter account. Because there's no reason to do so. There's no reason to have social media. Twitter is already a forum only for apoplectic, seething, fuming, hysterical zealots who oftentimes view themselves to be morally superior liberal Democrats. What's the point? There's no point. I mean, the New York Post was on there, and they suspended the New York Post's account. That's another thing also. Media, like President Trump needs like help in media. You know, he needs to elevate or at least amplify, or something has to happen. I mean, Republicans like Devin Nunes and Matt Gaetz and Jim Jordan and Ron DeSantis and Ron Johnson and Rand Paul. I mean, there needs to be media. Because, you could look at everyone from Eric Swalwell to AOC. I mean, these people are, always caught in scandals, always caught in controversies, always say the most horrendous things. You have Democrats who said, get into people's faces. And they have media. They have journalists that are activists. And President Trump didn't have that. You had 92% negative media coverage. So, I mean, how do you compete with that? How on earth do you compete with that, ladies and gentlemen? How on earth do you compete with that? And now you have, I've gone on this whole tangent. The managers plan to show previously unseen security footage and warn parents and teachers that it'll be graphically violent. Oh my goodness. Okay, you can rest assured there won't be any footage. Like Andy No, and who's a brilliant journalist, very courageous. Tim Pool, other journalists have video footage of what went on the past 5-6 months prior to November. In Seattle, in Portland. Do you want to show the kids that? Okay? A courageous and noble man in his 70s, a black man who was a police captain in St. Louis, lost his life, and it was streamed on Facebook. Okay? You want to, and God bless his family. You want to see footage of very peaceful protests the past 5 to 6 months, of buildings set ablaze and CNN journalists saying, oh yeah, it's fiery but mostly peaceful. There was $1 billion to $2 billion in property damage. Okay, in Los Angeles, and I know other cities, businesses were being boarded up saying, no, insert left-leaning organization name. We side with you. Please don't destroy our business. How many black-owned businesses? How many Asian-owned businesses? How many Latino-owned businesses? How many businesses from people of color were torched to the ground because of a reckoning that the newspapers say it was a reckoning? Okay, well, there were 14,000 arrests. You can't. Not all of the arrests were due to people, protesting just because of altruistic reasons. Some of them. You want to know why all the liberal and progressive YouTubers who constantly talk about left-leaning issues didn't protest? Where were they? Where was the footage of them protesting in their respective cities, especially the ones who live in Southern California? There were protests all the time because very likely they know deep inside, or they know that a lot of the protests ended up in situations, let's say, they don't want to be in, and they didn't want to actually address reality by being there. Well, anyway, the question is, why didn't they protest? Why don't they kneel? All those liberals, and see, the thing is, the anthem protest, to the people, the athletes protesting, that is their right as American citizens to protest, okay? I wouldn't do it because I just don't feel right, because I view it as showing love or patriotism or respect for the country. For that, so and there's always going to be yes, of course, police brutality is a horrendous thing. It needs to be addressed. Kaepernick started his protest during President Obama's administration. The Democrats did nothing about that issue, and I was writing about that issue, and I defended Colin Kaepernick in the Huffington Post when nobody on the left was. In one of my articles, and I wrote articles about police brutality, and it should have been addressed on a federal level when President Obama was president. But if the vantage point is, okay, a person is protesting for that, okay, but we live in a country of 320 million Americans with people of all different backgrounds who can say, okay, wait a second, there's an injustice here. There's a major injustice. I mean, I can go into the brutality at Standing Rock. We can talk about injustices here and say, okay, well, I'm kneeling for this injustice, I'm kneeling for that. If you looked at all the injustices in any country, you'd never kneel for any national anthem. But the issue with I forgot even where I was going. There should have been a national dialogue and debate and discussion. And when you allow one manner of thinking to dominate political discourse, and you do so, and the reason that we have this is because you have Republicans who still haven't come to terms with the fact that Trump has taken control of the Republican Party. And they're Liz Cheney and Mitt Romney, Ben Sass are just tooth and nail trying to just pretend reality doesn't exist. 2022 is when Trump Republicans will take over the House. Then you'll have instant impeachment. Impeachment now has been, this is not Watergate anymore. This is not even Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton lied under oath. Okay? That's why he was impeached. He lied under oath. And everybody found out anyway. But that's the Clintons for you. Anyway, give me your thoughts below. There should have been a national discourse and discussion on a whole lot of topics. And President Trump, I mean, his biggest mistake ever was was abandoning Michael Flynn. Once he did that, and I said that 4 years ago, 3 years ago in 2017. 17, 18, 19, 20, 4 years ago, like calendar years. In 2017, I said, that's the worst thing he could do. Because now they've gotten what they wanted, and they're going to go for more. And that's when you had the Comey memos and all of that. Give me your thoughts below. Hit subscribe right now. They don't have an argument. Their argument is Trump said something and his supporters are mindless. But you could say the same thing about rhetoric from Democratic politicians, and what? $1 billion to $2 billion in property damage. Give me your thoughts below. Hit subscribe right now. Thank you.